The morning light sliced through the glass towers of the city like a blade of gold, turning everything it touched into polished brilliance. Everything except the truth Aurora Harvey was about to uncover. She stood frozen in her executive office. The security footage paused on the image of a man in a faded blue uniform kneeling beside industrial kitchen bins. His hands moved quickly, transferring leftover company meals into old, mismatched containers. At first glance, it looked like theft, simple, careless theft. But something in the man's manner, the quiet urgency in his movements, made her hesitate. The CEO of Future Tech, known for her precision and her unforgiving standards, felt a flicker of unease. She had launched this investigation expecting to expose a problem. Instead, she felt she was staring at the beginning of a story. She didn't yet understand that if you believe kindness and second chances deserve a place in this world, please like, comment, share, and subscribe to Bright Hearts. Your support brings these real, emotional stories to life. Aurora pressed play. The janitor glanced around, not with guilt, but with worry, before sealing the containers with shaking hands. He didn't eat any of it. He didn't hide it. He simply packed as much as he could carry into an old canvas bag, slung it over his shoulder, clocked out early, and walked straight out the side door. No hesitation. No attempt to stash anything for himself. Just a determined, almost desperate stride. His name, the file said, was Andrew Ross. A widowed single father. Works nights. Quiet. Reliable. Never late. Nothing about him suggested a man who would risk his job for stolen food. And yet Aurora, driven by both suspicion and a strange undercurrent of curiosity, grabbed her coat and followed him. The city was buzzing with daytime warmth as she trailed him from a distance. Past the polished sidewalks, the glass storefronts, the busy cafes where executives laughed over morning lattes. Andrew didn't look at any of it. He walked with purpose, heading beyond the places people pretended poverty didn't exist. Beyond where success cast its longest shadow that he reached the underpass. And Aurora stopped cold. Dozens of people were gathered in the shade beneath the overpass bridge, faces weary, shoulders drooped beneath layers of worn clothing. Homeless men leaned against graffitied concrete pillars. A pair of runaway-looking teenagers huddled together for warmth. An elderly woman with trembling hands squeezed a thin blanket around her shoulders. Their eyes lifted, softening with familiarity the moment they saw Andrew. He smiled. A tired smile, but real, and gently knelt beside a woman sitting on the pavement. Without a word, he opened a container and handed it to her. She took it as if receiving something sacred. Aurora watched as Andrew moved from person to person, each one greeting him by name. And then she noticed a small figure beside him. A boy, no older than 8, with uncombed hair and a backpack covered in patches. He carefully handed out forks, napkins, little packets of salt and pepper, as if they were gold. Milo Ross, Andrew's file had noted. His son, the father worked. The son helped. Together they served at Aurora's throat tightened. The scene before her wasn't charity. It wasn't pity. It was family. A community held together by one man's quiet promise. She stepped closer, unable to tear herself away. And as she watched Andrew kneel before an old man whose hands shook too much to hold a container, she finally understood. None of this food was stolen. It was saved. Saved from being thrown away. Saved from being wasted. Saved for the people society never saw. Aurora had spent years calculating profits, predicting trends, optimizing teams, but she had never seen anything like this. Not in a boardroom. Not in a strategy plan. Not in her own carefully curated world. And suddenly she felt painfully, shamefully small. Andrew finished distributing the meals, then sat with Milo on the pavement, breathing heavily, as if carrying not just food, but the world. Aurora stepped forward at last, but as she approached, she saw it, the grief in Andrew's eyes. The kind that didn't fade. The kind that changed a person so deeply that kindness became the only thing that made sense anymore. She didn't say a word. Not yet. She simply watched as Andrew gave his own meal, untouched, to a teenage boy shivering against the pillar. When the boy asked him if he'd eaten, Andrew just smiled softly. "I'm okay," he whispered. He wasn't. Aurora could see that clearly. She returned to her office later that afternoon, but the underpass clung to her thoughts like a shadow. She couldn't shake the image of Milo's hopeful face or the way Andrew's shoulders sagged when he thought no one was looking. The next day, she called Human Resources. She didn't ask if Andrew broke rules. She asked how long he'd been working there, how long he'd been raising his son alone. And what she learned hit her harder than any quarterly report ever had. His wife, Raya, had passed away 2 years ago, suddenly, devastatingly, from an unexpected illness. The medical bills had swallowed every savings they had. Andrew sold everything, took the janitorial job at Future Tech, and never complained. His son struggled with the trauma, but stayed strong. And Andrew had started bringing food to the Underpass soon after losing his wife. It was her habit, they said. She had volunteered all the time. He was continuing her mission. Aurora closed her eyes. Something inside her shifted. The next week, she returned to the Underpass, this time approaching Andrew directly. He looked startled when he saw her and immediately tried to stand straighter, almost defensive. Before he could speak, she held up a hand. "I watched what you did," she said quietly. "I understand now." Andrew's face tightened, not with shame, but with fear. Fear of losing the only job he had. But Aurora continued, her voice softening in the way she hadn't allowed it to in years. "You weren't stealing. You were saving people." His eyes glistened. He didn't speak. He didn't need to. What followed wasn't a reprimand, but a beginning. Aurora personally arranged new protocols for leftover food at Future Tech, ensuring anything still safe was packaged, labeled, and delivered to shelters daily. She placed Andrew in charge of the initiative, giving him a small team, a proper budget, and full support. The company cafeteria buzzed with new purpose. Employees volunteered. Word spread. Donations came in. But Aurora didn't stop there. She offered Milo a scholarship to Future Tech's partnered school, giving him access to the education his mother had dreamed of. She also cleared the remaining medical debts that Andrew had been quietly paying off for years. Andrew cried when she told him. Really cried. Right there in the break room, with his hands shaking and his shoulders trembling as Milo hugged him tightly. And Aurora, who had hardened herself for so long, felt her own eyes blur. In the weeks that followed, something extraordinary happened. Aurora began appearing at the Underpass every other day, carrying food, blankets, supplies. People were startled at first, a CEO kneeling in the dirt with them, but kindness made strangers into equals. Soon they trusted her. Soon they smiled when she arrived. And as she stood beside Andrew, she realized she hadn't just helped rebuild his life. He had helped rebuild hers. She had spent years chasing success, believing compassion had no place in leadership. But here, under the daylight filtering through the overpass beams, she discovered the truth. A company wasn't just buildings or profits. It was people, all people, and Andrew Ross, the janitor who once packed leftovers in the dark, had taught her more about humanity than any mentor ever had. As the months passed, the Underpass community grew stronger. More shelters partnered with Future Tech's food program. Milo grew braver, louder, happier. Andrew slowly learned to smile again. And Aurora, once isolated by her position, found a sense of belonging she didn't know she had been missing. The city began calling Andrew's initiative the Underpass Miracle. But to Aurora, the real miracle wasn't the headlines or the praise. It was the moment she realized that sometimes the people who appear to have the least are the ones who give the most. And sometimes the greatest leaders are the ones humble enough to follow where compassion leads. If this story touched your heart, please like, share, and comment your thoughts. And don't forget to subscribe to Bright Hearts for more emotional and inspiring stories like this.